I know this is really the tough part for a champions player, right? Wait a minute, you got to have your 25 points of defense and 10 points minimum has to be resistant, or else you're going to get killed.
Yeah.
Now, let's breathe deep a couple of times because it doesn't work that way in champions now. First of all, there are no killing attacks in the classic sense, like we talked about. Nobody can spend 30 points, use 30 points to get something that can drop you, right? Through ordinary, forget it. We have restored defense back to its proper place. It is defense. So even if someone gets the piercing modification, that isn't going to, your defense is still going to help you, for example, against the knockout value. And they're not going to basically going to have enough dice to drop you unless that's their signature attack.
You had unless it's a normal person that doesn't do anything, which you're not even counting.
Right. You know how it works. You know how it works in Champions now. The normal person does have attributes, and one of those attributes is defense 0. Which, by the way, if you think about it, suddenly means that yes, you can kill an ordinary person. You don't need a killing attack to do it.
Yeah.
Just hit them with anything with 10, with 10 body coming in, and you'll do it. So, which is pretty brutal, but
yeah,
there you go. That's the normals are quite fragile in this game.
Well, they're quite fragile in real life too.
Right. When you take body damage in this game, when you do a recovery, you will get 1 body back. That's part of a recovery. You restore a body. And the only reason you wouldn't do that is if the power that hurt you was destructive. The same for knockout and endurance. If someone hits you for an endurance drain and it's destructive, then you can't use your recovery to get that back. Same thing for this. So the only way to get body that isn't going to come back is if it's destructive. So for a classic killing attack, you have to modify your blast to piercing, severe, and destructive, which is a lot of modification. I mean, those dice are going to be really, high value. And remember, you're only counting the body that's rolled, what we call the core value now. So there is no roll where you count it up and do that much body. You don't roll 3d6 and do an average of 11 body to people anymore. That doesn't happen. You have to get enough dice where the body rolled is going to hurt you that bad.
Oh, I see. So right. It's basically counted as if it's normal dice.
Exactly. Yeah. There is no killing attack in the mathematical sense at all. Because that's busted. It's just always was busted. And
so how would you build, for example, a regular normal handgun?
You don't. A handgun is not a superhero. These rules are built to build superheroes. What you do for a guy with a gun is you don't define it as you don't build the gun. You say the guy with the gun is a hazard. And you go over to chapter 10 and you build the hazard. And you might have a gun. Now, this is great. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Sure, yeah.
It
is different than the basic system.
Absolutely. Well, you see that killing attack, that idea, the handgun, built with points, that does this. Yeah. That's a staple of a certain branch of hero system design. But it's not it fits badly into early champions. You can really look at the rules and see the different parts of the rules just not meshing. So if we look at comics, let's take the comics that you and I know and love, right? I'm gonna spitball it. Mid-60s Marvel and DC and Associated. Mid-60s through, let's say, about 1987. Right. And I know that's old. Everybody reading, listening to this is like, what are these old guys? No, dude, we all know that's the sweet spot. And so we take a look at this and you'll see that a gun in the comics, particularly a handgun, is whatever it needs to be for that particular story. You know, half the time, they're basically plastic props that people are waving around. And the other half, in another fraction of the time, this thing is more powerful than any superpower, any super defense, anywhere. It is the Death Star in that guy's hand. You know, basically the comics just do whatever with guns. So what I'm saying is the Punisher doesn't have guns. The Punisher has powers.
Okay.
And the special effects are his guns.
Guns, yeah.
And so that's the way we do it in Champions Now.
Okay, and so that's the difference between a normal, unnamed thug with a handgun that's robbing somebody and the hero tries to stop them versus a supervillain with his gun.
With a gun, yeah. When the supervillain attacks a sidearm, you're like, oh shit. Right? When the dude with a gun, you're like, all right, what's the hazard?
Yeah.
And the hazard the way hazards work is they hit you automatically in the area they affect. And that's how they work. There's no defense to being hit by the hazard. Unless there's a dedicated column, in the hazard list that says what you do to ignore the hazard. And they're mostly pretty easy, like acrobatics. If you've got acrobatics, use it according to the rules and you're fine. The hazard, fuck the hazard. And then there's another column for how to make the hazard go away. And then a subset of all that are hazards that can be fought, that you actually use as a combat phenomenon. So the dude with the gun, if he's a hazard, is going to be written up this way. We know the power that represents the hazard's effect. And we know what you do to ignore it. And we know how you turn it off. And in this case, it's the kind of hazard that you fight. So, it's pretty straightforward. And you're kind of like, oh, that's right. These are different phenomena, right? There isn't like a gun of this kind that has this many points and is defined like this. There just isn't. Because there isn't one in the comics.
Yeah, the gun your typical agent's going to have, and the gun the supervillain has are going to be built completely differently. Even
correct, and not only that, but the agent is himself a hazard. You don't remember, as I mentioned before, we start at 200 points and we go up. We don't go down. So you don't build, a shield agent with points. No, he's a hazard.
Okay.
And in particular, a group of such individuals is also considered as a unified hazard.
It's just a bigger hazard.
Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of fun. I'm really mean about this. Like a group-based hazard, you have to knock it down size unit at a time.
You have to get it smaller. Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
And what's really frustrating, now you may change its range of effect based on that, but you don't change its magnitude of effect. So the last one standing is going to do just as much damage as the bunch of them did. And so you basically have to, work your way through them, which is exactly what all these fucking minions and agents are for, right? One of the nice things about like a group of minions as a hazard is that instead of doing real damage to you, their biggest problem is that they're a big entangle. Right? I mean, you got to get through them to get to the guy, and they gum you up on the way because they're all grabbing you. So, anyway, so we can kind of relax the gun, the gun fear at this point. You even do that if you hit 0. Same thing for knockout and endurance. You hit 0, you are going to be able to recover. So let's say what's your current recovery is 14, right?
My body is 14.
So your current recovery is 14. And so then let's say you get knocked down to 0 knockout and 0 endurance. Because, well, actually, that goes without saying. You take 0 knockout, your endurance drops to 0 instantly. Okay, so bam, you've eaten the dirt. Well, your next phase, you get a recovery. So you'll have 14 knockout and you'll have 14 endurance. And if you had lost any body, you'll have 1 body more.
Okay.
Right? Now, here's the thing. You go down again in this fight, you go to knockout 0 again, you're toast. You're just knocked out. That's the end of you for this fight. And so the same goes for body. If you go to 0, let's say you go to 0 body and you get that 1 recovery and you're still in the fight, looking all beat up now, a little trickle of blood situation going on here. Then, if you go to body to 0 again, then you're in dying mode. So going to his body 0 the first time doesn't put you in dying status. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. So the villains have to really try and kill you because they have to knock you down to 0 body twice in the same fight.
Now, granted, you don't get like recovery back to full body. Right, you're only getting 1 body back per, but per recovery. So you're it's but the point is that it looks worse than it is until that second 0 is the idea. And I don't know if you remember the old rules way of doing it, but dying status was super generous anyway. There was no mechanical point that said, okay, you're dead. It was all, you're dying, you need medical or equivalent attention. But if someone stays with you, you'll live. And I mean, that's really, really, I mean, I joke about it in the rules. I even say, like, even a dog or a toddler or something, that'll do it, because that'll do it in the comics. And so you get, and then what regeneration does is it allows you to roll dice and actually count the value, and that's the amount of body that you'll get back. So regeneration just basically makes that recovery nice and healthy.
Yeah, does a lot.
So I think this works pretty well, and it means that, granted, everyone likes resistant defenses, but if you just take 20 points of defense, don't worry. Even getting riddled with machine gun fire isn't going to kill you outright. And also, you need less of it. You don't have to walk around with 15 points of resistant defense just to not die, which in the old rules pretty much was the case.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of basing off of, because that's all I know.
Yeah. That's going to be the biggest shift in people's minds. They're actually going to have to, I suspect we're going to see a lot of people piling points into that before they actually realize how it works and realize how redundant they're being.
Okay.